My name is Sarah J. Markham, and I am 28 years old. Christmas morning started with snow, but not the soft storybook kind that makes you want to sip cocoa and take pictures. This was the ugly kind. Slush and ice that turned roads into gray, slick ribbons and made every stoplight feel like a gamble. I remember gripping the steering wheel harder than I needed to, trying to keep my face calm in the rearview mirror because Alina was watching me. She's 3, and she's at that age where she doesn't just hear what you say, she feels what you don't. If my voice went tight, her little mouth would tighten too. If I sighed too long, she would blink at me like she was already learning how disappointment looks. I had dressed her in the sparkly red dress she insisted on. White tights, little boots, she picked herself. She looked like a tiny holiday postcard, cheeks pink from the cold, eyes bright with that pure excitement kids have when they believe the world is designed to surprise them. For weeks she'd been talking about Grandma's tree, about the lights, about how Santa knows where Grandma lives too. She carried the homemade ornament she made at preschool like it was a treasure. A misshapen circle of clay painted too thick, with glitter glued in uneven patches. She kept it in her lap the whole drive, whispering to it like it could hear her. I should have known better, and that's the part that still makes me angry. Not at them, but at myself. Because when you grow up being the family's afterthought, you learn to crave crumbs. You learn to treat basic kindness like a miracle. Every December I told myself maybe this year would be different. Maybe they'd finally see me, finally appreciate me, finally act like I belonged. I kept driving back into the same house expecting it to become a different place. We pulled up to my parents' place around 9. My sister's SUV was already parked out front, engine still warm like she'd just arrived. Before I even unbuckled Alina, I could hear shouting and laughter through the walls, the kind that always meant my sister's boys were showing off. Alina pressed her face to the window, breath fogging the glass, and pointed. "Bikes," she whispered. Sure enough, my nephews were outside in the backyard riding brand new bikes that still had tags hanging off the handlebars. One was neon green, the other metallic blue, like someone had ordered them straight from a commercial. My mom was filming on her phone, laughing loudly, telling them to ride faster so she could get the shot. My dad stood behind her with his coffee, grinning like this was the best part of Christmas. One of the boys yelled, "Santa got me exactly what I asked for." Alina tugged my coat. "Me bike too?" I swallowed. I forced a smile. "Santa leaves gifts inside too," I told her. "Be patient." She nodded, trusting me, and that trust felt like a weight. Inside, the living room looked like a catalog. Tree lit up perfectly, music playing, piles of gifts wrapped in expensive paper with bows so neat they looked professionally tied. My mom always cared about appearances. She could neglect you emotionally and still make sure the centerpiece matched the napkins. She could say cruel things and still hang a wreath like she was the kind of woman who baked cookies for the neighborhood. But as I stood there with Alina's mittened hand in mine, something hit me immediately. Not a single box had my daughter's name on it. There were stacks for my nephews. There were gifts for my sister. There were gifts for my dad. There were even a few for distant relatives who didn't show up half the time. But nothing for Alina, nothing tucked in a corner, nothing waiting under the branches, not even a small one. My stomach dropped, but I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe my mom had hidden them. Maybe she wanted Alina to open hers last. Maybe. Because hope is stubborn like that. And because earlier in December, I had sent my mom $500. I had done it without drama, without conditions, like I always did. I told her I was swamped with work travel and asked if she could help get some gifts for Alina. A little kitchen set, some books, maybe one of those dolls with changeable outfits. My mom had responded quickly, almost too quickly, saying she knew exactly what to get. She even added a heart emoji. That should have been my first warning. My mom only used hearts when she wanted something. Now I stood in front of that tree, watching my sister's boys tear into gift after gift, paper flying, plastic crackling, my mom clapping like she was applauding a performance. Alina sat quietly on the rug with her ornament in her lap, looking around like she was trying to figure out where she belonged in the scene. The longer it went on, the more her excitement started to fade into confusion. She didn't throw a tantrum. She didn't cry. She just kept glancing at me, eyes asking questions she didn't have the words for yet. Why don't I have anything? Did I do something wrong? Am I invisible? I tried to distract her. I pointed out the ornaments. I let her hang her preschool one on the lower branch. She stood on her tiptoes, carefully pressing it into place, and for a second she smiled again. Then my mom finally moved. Not toward the tree, toward the sideboard. She pulled out a small, crushed-looking box like it had been forgotten there. It wasn't even under the tree. It wasn't wrapped in fancy paper. The wrapping looked like it had been used once already, wrinkled and torn in the corner, taped back together lazily. My mom held it out like she was doing Alina a favor by remembering her at all. "Here," she said, voice too loud, drawing attention. "This one is for you." Alina's face lit up instantly because she's 3 and she still believes grown-ups are good. She took the box with both hands and opened it slowly, carefully, like she didn't want to tear the paper too fast and risk ruining the moment. Inside was a plastic doll. Dollar store quality, maybe worse. No packaging, no accessories. Just a broken toy shoved into tissue paper, like an insult wrapped in thin disguise. It was missing a leg. Alina blinked. She looked down at it, then up at me, her smile dropping so fast it made my chest hurt. She didn't cry. She didn't even frown the way adults do. She just looked confused, like her little brain couldn't reconcile the idea that Santa and Grandma could give something broken on purpose. And then my mom said it, loud enough for everyone to hear. "That's what happens when your mom's a disappointment to us." The room shifted. My sister burst out laughing like it was the funniest thing she'd heard all year. Her kids laughed too, not because they understood, but because they'd learned that cruel things were what you laughed at in that house. My dad chuckled under his breath, the kind of laugh that pretends it's harmless but still chooses a side. Alina's eyes widened. She looked back down at the doll, like it might suddenly make sense. Like maybe she was holding it wrong. Like maybe if she stared hard enough, the missing leg would appear. I crouched beside her. I didn't cry. I didn't let my voice shake. I leaned close and whispered something only she could hear, something soft and steady, because she deserved that, even if I didn't. "It's not you," I told her. "You didn't do anything wrong." She nodded like she believed me, because she has no reason not to. Then I stood up with her hand in mine, and I realized something in the same instant. What they had just done wasn't an accident. It was a message, a performance, a way to make sure I remembered my place in front of everyone, even in front of my child. And what none of them knew was that I hadn't brought in our gifts yet. My car was parked down the street, not in the driveway. In the trunk were 2 large black bags filled with wrapped presents, all hand-picked, all expensive. Designer perfume for my mom, a $900 drone for my sister's oldest, a leather tech backpack for my dad, custom monogram jackets for everyone. I had asked them weeks ago what they wanted, and they sent me lists like they always did. I didn't ask for a dime, I just paid. Because that's what I always did. I didn't say anything. I didn't argue. I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me explode. I walked out to the car, loaded the bags into my arms, and carried them back inside like I was bringing in groceries. The room went dead quiet the moment they saw the bags. My mom's eyes lit up first, like she'd won something. My sister stepped closer, already reaching for a tag, her mouth forming a smile she didn't deserve. Even my dad straightened in his chair like he could feel the shift. I set the bags down by the tree. My sister's fingers brushed the first gift. I stopped her. My voice was calm, almost gentle, which made it sharper. "You won't be getting these," I said. She laughed at first, like I was joking, like I was doing a little dramatic flourish to spice up the morning. Then she looked at my face, and the laughter died. For a moment, nobody spoke. It was almost impressive how quickly the atmosphere shifted, like someone had reached over and turned off the music mid-song. My sister's hand hovered in the air, fingers still curled around the edge of a gift tag, her smile frozen in a way that looked more confused than offended. My mom blinked twice, as if she'd misheard me. My dad pushed his chair back slightly, not standing up, just adjusting, like he needed a better angle to assess the situation. "What do you mean?" my mom said slowly, her voice tight. "You won't be getting these." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain. I simply bent down, lifted Alina into my arms, and turned toward the door. Behind me, I heard my sister scoff. "Oh my God, Sarah, don't make a scene." That almost made me laugh. The irony of her saying that, after what she and my mother had just done to my 3-year-old in front of a Christmas tree, was staggering. But I didn't laugh. I didn't turn around either. I walked out. The cold hit my face immediately, sharp and bracing. Alina wrapped her arms around my neck, her small body warm against mine. She didn't ask questions. She didn't cry. She just rested her head on my shoulder the way children do when they trust you to handle things. I carried the gift bags back to the car, set them gently in the trunk, and closed it without slamming it. No one followed us. No one called my name. No one apologized. I got into the driver's seat, buckled Alina in, and drove away like we were leaving a place that had never really been home. The drive back was quieter than the drive there. Alina fell asleep after about 20 minutes, clutching her preschool ornament like it was a security blanket. I kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, replaying the moment over and over in my head. The doll, the laugh, my mother's voice, the way my daughter's face changed when she realized something wasn't right. That image lodged itself somewhere deep in my chest and refused to move. I didn't respond to anyone for 2 full days. Not a text, not a call, not even when my phone buzzed late at night with my sister's name flashing across the screen. I focused on Alina instead. I kept her routine exactly the same. Cartoons in the morning, pasta for dinner, bath time at the same hour. We colored. We read the same book 3 times because she liked the way I did the voices. The broken doll sat on a chair in her room. She didn't touch it. She didn't throw it away either. She just left it there, like something she didn't want but wasn't sure she was allowed to discard. That somehow hurt more than if she'd cried or asked questions. It meant she was already learning how to accept disappointment quietly. On the 3rd day, my sister cracked. Her text came through in the afternoon, casual on the surface, sharp underneath. "Are you done throwing a tantrum yet?" I stared at the screen for a long moment before locking my phone and setting it face down on the counter. An hour later, another message came through. "The boys are confused about why their aunt stormed out on Christmas. Still nothing from me." My mom waited until that evening. Her message was longer, carefully structured, the way she always wrote when she wanted to sound reasonable. She said I embarrassed her. She said I ruined Christmas. She said Alina was too young to understand and I was projecting my own issues onto a child. Then she added the line that made my hands go cold. "She's used us her entire life after all we've done for you." I read that sentence over and over, trying to understand how someone could say that with a straight face. Used us. As if the years of money, favors, and emotional labor I'd poured into that family had simply vanished from memory. As if I hadn't been the one, smoothing over arguments, covering bills, buying gifts, paying for emergencies, and keeping everyone afloat without ever asking for recognition. They really believed they were the victims. On the 4th day, my dad called. I let it ring. He left a voicemail, sounding confused rather than remorseful, asking why I was being so cold. He didn't mention Alina. He didn't mention the doll. He didn't mention what my mom said. Just vague disappointment that the usual flow of things had been interrupted. That night, after Alina went to bed, I opened the trunk of my car. The gifts were still there, perfectly wrapped, untouched, each one labeled with a name written in my handwriting. I carried them inside and lined them up in my living room, setting them out like exhibits. My mom's perfume, my dad's backpack, my nephew's toys, my sister's tech accessories. Each one represented another time I'd tried to buy peace, buy love, buy my place in a family that never intended to give it to me freely. Standing there, something uncomfortable settled in. I had spent more time planning their happiness than my own. I unwrapped every gift, one by one, carefully peeling back paper, removing tags, stripping away the illusion. Then I boxed them up again and loaded them into my car the next morning. I drove to a women's shelter, a youth center, a family assistance program. I donated almost everything. I didn't take pictures. I didn't post about it. I didn't tell anyone. I just let it be done. When New Year's rolled around, something shifted. I didn't send my parents their usual grocery transfer. I didn't cover my dad's car insurance. I didn't send my sister the $300 I'd been quietly sending her every week for years to help with expenses. I hadn't even realized how automatic it had all become until I stopped. That's when the panic started. My mom called twice a day. My dad sent short messages asking if everything was okay. My sister suddenly wanted to talk things through. No one mentioned the doll. No one mentioned Alina. It was like that moment didn't exist in their version of events. Then I heard it through someone else. A friend of mine works near the pharmacy my mom uses. She texted me late one afternoon. "Hey, is everything okay with your family?" I asked why. She hesitated, then said she'd overheard my mom arguing at the counter, asking if she could pay for half her prescription now and the rest later. My mom has never lived paycheck to paycheck. She just never lived without me either. I sat with that information longer than I expected, waiting for guilt to show up. It didn't. What I felt instead was a strange, hollow calm, like a knot I'd been carrying for years had finally loosened. About a week later, my sister showed up at my door unannounced. She looked different, tired, less sharp, less certain. She asked if we could talk. I didn't invite her in. We stood there while Alina watched cartoons behind me, her laughter drifting through the hallway like a reminder of what actually mattered. She told me my parents were stressed. She said they didn't realize how much I helped. She said I was taking things too far over one moment. I looked at her and said, "Family doesn't humiliate toddlers." She didn't have a comeback for that. Before she left, she said something that stuck with me. "You're changing," she said. "You're becoming cruel." I closed the door and locked it. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing their approval. And they could feel it. The first real sign of trouble didn't come with shouting or accusations. It came quietly, the way consequences usually do when no one's been paying attention. An email from my dad landed in my inbox late one night. No greeting, no explanation. Just a forwarded notice with a giant red warning banner across the top. Final utility bill. Disconnection scheduled. Amount due, $432 on 666. The number was circled in bold red, like someone wanted to make sure I saw it clearly. That was usually something I handled without thinking. A few taps on my phone and their lights stayed on. It had happened before, more than once. I stared at the email for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen, muscle memory trying to take over. I didn't reply. I didn't pay it either. The next morning, my mom called. I watched the phone ring until it stopped. Then my sister called. She left a voicemail trying to sound casual, talking about how the kids missed me, how things were a little tight since Christmas, how she hoped we could get back to normal soon. Back to normal meant I paid and they pretended not to notice. That same week, my dad called again. Twice in one day. The second voicemail was quieter, his voice low, like he didn't want my mom to hear him. He mentioned the mortgage being a mess and the bank starting to ask questions. He didn't say it outright, but I understood. I'd stopped sending the extra $600 a month I'd been covering on their house for the past 2 years. He had assumed I never would. I sat with that information longer than I expected, waiting for guilt to arrive like it always had before. It didn't. What I felt instead was clarity, clean and sharp. A few days later, a friend sent me a picture. My mom, behind the counter of a gas station convenience store not far from their neighborhood, wearing a blue vest. She looked smaller somehow, older. Her shoulders hunched like she was trying to make herself disappear. I stared at that photo for a long time, not because I felt bad, at least not in the way they'd trained me to, but because for years she'd told me working retail was for women who'd failed at life. She used to say that while I handed her envelopes of cash for trips, for new bags, for hair appointments, now she was folding lottery tickets and scanning beer cans because I wasn't there anymore. The silence from me wasn't just financial now. I didn't come around. I didn't call. I didn't answer messages. I focused on Alina, on work, on building a life that didn't revolve around rescuing people who mocked me when I was useful and resented me when I wasn't. Then my sister showed up again. No warning. Just stood on my porch with her arms crossed, jaw set like she'd rehearsed this confrontation in the car. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me so Alina wouldn't hear. She launched right into it. The boys were upset. Our parents were stressed. The electricity had been cut for a full day last week. Then she said the sentence she thought would finally break me. "You're really going to let us fall apart just to prove a point?" I looked at her and realized something unsettling. I wasn't trying to prove anything. "I'm not proving a point," I said evenly. "I'm removing myself from the game." She scoffed, shaking her head. "You've always been like this, keeping score, waiting for the moment you can punish us." I almost laughed. The projection was so obvious it hurt. "I paid," I said. "For years. You laughed. You took. You watched my daughter get humiliated and didn't say a word. This isn't punishment, it's boundaries." She called me selfish. Then, almost as an afterthought, she asked if I still had any of the gifts. I told her where they went. The shelter downtown, the youth center, the family assistance program. The same places my mom used to sneer at when I volunteered, telling me I was wasting my time on people who didn't matter. Her face dropped. Then she said something quieter, something that felt closer to the truth than she probably intended. "You're starting to enjoy this, aren't you?" I didn't answer. But later that night, when I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I admitted something to myself I didn't like. She wasn't entirely wrong. Not in the gloating, rubbing it in way, but in the deep, quiet way of someone who had spent years being treated like a failure while single-handedly holding up the people doing the mocking. watching them scramble, watching the consequences finally land, it felt validating. It felt fair. And that scared me, because that's who they were to me for years. People who hurt and waited for a reaction. People who fed on control. And now, in a twisted way, I was doing the same thing back. Things moved fast after that. My dad's car got repossessed. My mom's credit card was declined at a local market. I didn't hear about those directly. They came through friends, acquaintances, whispers. Information that used to be hidden because I was there to prevent it was suddenly everywhere. Then my sister sent me a long email, paragraphs blaming me for the stress on their marriage, saying her husband was burned out trying to make up for the money I used to send, saying their youngest had to quit a sport because they couldn't afford the equipment. She ended it with, "You're hurting innocent people just because you can't let go of a grudge." I didn't respond. I knew exactly who was innocent, and it wasn't the adults who let my daughter hold a broken doll while their kids unwrapped bikes and laughed. They wanted me to feel guilty. I didn't. What I felt was something closer to resolve, because the longer I stayed quiet, the more they revealed themselves, the more they panicked, the more they begged, not for forgiveness, not for understanding, but for money. I wasn't their daughter. I was their ATM. And now the ATM was out of order. It started with a Facebook post. That alone should have told me how serious they were, because my mom barely knows how to use email. She still calls text messages notes, but suddenly, overnight, she figured out how to write a multi-paragraph public post and tag half the town. No names, of course. Just a long emotional monologue about how painful it is when your own child turns her back on the family after everything you've done for her. About how she was now working nights just to afford groceries while her daughter lived in a big city apartment, too proud to help. About sacrifice. About betrayal. About how some children forget where they came from. The comments poured in. Church ladies I hadn't spoken to since high school. Old family friends. Distant cousins. People who had never once asked how Alina was doing suddenly had a lot to say about my character. They told my mom she deserved better. They said kids today don't understand loyalty. A few even tagged me directly, telling me to remember my roots. I didn't respond. I didn't defend myself in public. I didn't argue in the comments. I just watched. And then my sister chimed in. "She's always taken from you, Mom," she wrote. Maybe now she's finally showing her true colors. That was the moment I realized this wasn't desperation anymore. This was coordinated. They weren't just trying to guilt me back into the family. They were trying to rewrite the story so thoroughly that even Alina and I would look like villains in it. And they didn't stop there. My mom started calling people in my life. A friend texted me, uneasy, saying my mom had reached out concerned about me, suggesting I'd been acting erratic. A coworker forwarded me a message my sister had sent, vague but dangerous, hinting that I might not be well and that someone should check on me. They were laying the groundwork, trying to make me look unstable so they could justify everything they'd done. I could have stayed quiet. I almost did. But then I saw one comment buried deep in the thread. Someone asked how Alina was doing, clearly trying to sound kind. My mom replied, "We gave her a sweet little doll for Christmas, but she didn't even say thank you. Looks like she's learning from her mother." My hands went numb. They humiliated her once in private, in front of a tree and a family that laughed. That almost broke me. But this was different. This was public. This was them calling my 3-year-old ungrateful, using her as proof that I was somehow defective. That was the line. I still didn't make a public post. I didn't call them out by name. I didn't fight them where they wanted to fight. I sent private messages instead, to a handful of the loudest commenters. The ones with the most to say. I told them the truth, calmly, clearly. I told them I had sent my parents $500 specifically for Alina's Christmas gifts. I told them that money went to my sister's kids instead. I told them Alina was handed a broken doll missing a leg while her cousins rode brand new bikes in the backyard. And I sent one photo. Alina sitting on my couch, the doll in her lap, her face confused and small. I didn't add commentary. I didn't plead my case. I didn't ask them to take sides. I just let the truth sit there. By morning, my mom's post was gone. No follow-up, no clarification, no apology. It vanished like it had never existed. 2 days later, a package arrived at my door. No return address, just Alina's name written in thick marker across the top. Inside was a perfectly wrapped box in gold foil paper, tied with real ribbon. Inside that was an American Girl doll. The exact one Alina had circled in a catalog at the beginning of December, still in its box. Brand new outfits, accessories, both legs firmly attached. There was a note. We hope you like this one better. Love, Grandma and Grandpa. No apology, no acknowledgement of the other doll, just damage control. Alina opened it and smiled. She looked at me and said very matter-of-factly, "She has both her legs this time." Then she ran off to show it to her stuffed animals. I sat there holding the empty box, understanding something important. They didn't send that doll because they were sorry. They sent it because they'd lost control of the narrative. And control mattered more to them than remorse ever had. I didn't say thank you. I didn't text them. I didn't call. I didn't even let Alina call. I placed the box from the American Girl doll in the recycling bin and moved on with our day like it had arrived from a stranger, because that's what it felt like, a stranger's attempt to smooth over something they had no intention of fully owning. For a while, nothing happened. No messages, no public posts, no dramatic follow-ups. The silence stretched in a way that felt deliberate, like they were waiting for me to break first, waiting for me to soften, waiting for me to accept the doll as a peace offering and slip quietly back into the role I'd always played. Weeks went by. Then something changed. The first sign came in the mail. Not a text, not a voicemail, a handwritten card. My mom's handwriting was uneven, almost shaky, like she wasn't used to writing anything that couldn't be edited or unsent. I stood at the kitchen counter for a long time before opening it, bracing myself for manipulation dressed up as remorse. It didn't come. The card was simple. "Sarah, we made a mess of things. I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. I know I can't undo what we said and did, but I hope you'll let us try to make it right. We miss Alina. We miss you. We'll do better. I promise. Love, Mom." No excuses, no blame, no mention of stress or misunderstandings. No reminder of everything they'd done for me. Just an apology, stripped of its usual armor. It almost made me cry. Almost. A few days later, 2 boxes appeared on my porch. No delivery company, no note. One addressed to me, one to Alina. Inside Alina's box was a custom princess bedspread, her favorite animated characters embroidered into soft pink fabric, her name stitched carefully along the edge. Beneath it were books, puzzles, a music box that played "You Are My Sunshine." All new, all expensive, all chosen with intention. My box held a necklace. Not just any necklace, rose gold, minimalist, a tiny diamond set off center, the exact one I'd once pointed out to my sister in passing almost 2 years earlier, saying it reminded me of strength because it was delicate but not fragile. I'd forgotten about that moment. They hadn't, and still I didn't respond, because as moved as I was, I needed to know something before I let even an inch of my guard down. I needed to see whether this was remorse or panic wearing a softer face. That answer came through my sister. She texted me late one night. "The boys asked why I haven't been going to their soccer games. Mom and Dad are trying. They really are. Can we meet? Just you and me." I agreed, but not at her house, and not at mine. We met at a coffee shop halfway between us, neutral ground with 2 bright lights and the smell of burnt espresso. She was already there when I arrived, sitting with her hands wrapped tightly around a cup she hadn't touched. She looked older, worn down, like someone who'd been holding her breath for weeks and finally realized she couldn't anymore. She didn't waste time. "They used you," she said quietly. "All of us did. We never respected what you did because we didn't think you'd ever stop." I said nothing. I just waited. She went on, her voice shaking now. She said my mom cried when she saw the photo of Alina with the broken doll. Said she'd never felt smaller. Said they talked about paying me back. Not just the $500. Everything. Selling things if they had to. Her husband's motorcycle, my dad's coin collection, even some of my mom's old jewelry. I didn't react. I wasn't holding my breath. Then she asked the question she'd been building toward the whole time. "Are you coming for Easter?" I looked at her and answered honestly. If they want me there, they can start by wiring the $500 they owe Alina. Not a check, not cash, a direct deposit, and a note addressed to her that says, "We're sorry," clearly. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she nodded. I left without saying goodbye. 3 days later, the money appeared in my account. Exactly $500. The memo line read, "Alina." No message, no apology attached, just cold, quiet repayment. That night, an envelope arrived, hand-delivered. Inside was a card addressed to Alina. My mom's handwriting again, slow and careful. "We're sorry for the doll, sweet girl. You deserve better. We'll do better." I read it to Alina before bed. She listened, nodded, and said, "Okay," like it was the easiest thing in the world. 3 years old, and already more emotionally honest than half the adults in my family. Easter came. They waited. They sent photos of the table, of the food, of the egg hunt, even a small basket on the porch with Alina's name written on it in pink marker. I didn't reply. I didn't go. And for the first time, the pressure wasn't on me. It was on them. The silence after Easter felt different from the silences that came before it. It wasn't sharp. It wasn't loaded. It didn't buzz with expectation or threat. It just existed. My phone stayed quiet. No late-night guilt texts. No sudden emergencies. No carefully worded apologies asking for a fresh start. For the first time in my life, my family wasn't asking me for anything at all. And that should have felt like relief. In some ways, it did. The constant knot in my stomach loosened. I slept better. I stopped flinching when my phone buzzed. I planned my weeks without mentally reserving space for whatever crisis they might manufacture next. Alina and I built small routines that belonged only to us. Pancakes on Sundays, walks after dinner when the weather allowed, planting flowers on the porch and letting her water them until the soil turned to mud. But something else crept in too, quieter and more unsettling. I noticed myself rereading the apologies. Not because I wanted to forgive them, but because I was waiting. Waiting for the other shoe to drop. Waiting for the moment their remorse would twist back into entitlement. Waiting for them to prove me right. And somewhere in that waiting, I realized something that scared me more than their cruelty ever had. I was starting to enjoy their discomfort. Not in a loud, vengeful way. Not in a way that made me want to brag or punish them publicly, but in a deep, private way that felt too familiar. I recognized it because it was the same feeling they'd fed off for years. Power, control, the satisfaction of watching someone squirm because you finally held the upper hand. That's when I knew I had to stop. Not for them, for me. I didn't want to become a mirror image of the people who hurt my child. I didn't want Alina growing up watching me measure my worth by how much leverage I had over others. I wanted her to see boundaries, not revenge. Peace, not prolonged war. So I pulled back. No more tests, no more conditions, no more waiting to see how badly they wanted me back. I stopped tracking their behavior. I stopped asking my sister for updates. I stopped checking the family group chat I'd muted months ago and never reopened. I stopped letting their attempts at reconciliation occupy space in my head. Instead, I built something new. Smaller, quieter, ours. I took Alina to the park on Saturdays. I let her pick which book we read at night, even when it meant reading the same one 3 times in a row. We decorated our own tree the next Christmas, mismatched ornaments and construction paper snowflakes taped to the wall. No audience, no judgment, just joy that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. My parents still call sometimes. They ask if they can see her, if we're coming by, if we want to start fresh. I say, not yet. Sometimes I say, not now. Sometimes I don't answer at all. And for the first time, I don't feel like I owe them an explanation. Because love doesn't come with strings. Respect doesn't require endurance. And family doesn't get to hurt a child and then buy their way back in. I don't hate them. I don't wish them harm. I just refuse to keep shrinking so they can feel tall. That's the peace I found. Not the loud, triumphant kind. The quiet kind that stays.